The 4.8 Genshin livestream just wrapped up, and that means the 5 stars have been revealed. We're going to talk about which ones are worth your primo gems, or if you should just skip and save for Natlan. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. So first half, which I'm really surprised about, by the way, is going to be Navia and Nilou, and then second half is going to be Emily and Yelan. So these are pretty massive and pretty stacked banners, honestly, going right into Natlan. Like, they definitely saved some very worthwhile characters for the end of this patch. First thing that surprised me is that we're not getting a Wriothesley rerun. I thought that Wriothesley would rerun before the end of patch, since he came pretty early in the 4.x patches. So I'm pretty surprised we're not seeing Wriothesley here, but I guess it is what it is. Hopefully he comes in early Natlan for those looking for Wriothesley. Between Nilou and Navia, both characters are extremely fun. Navia is just a very consistent, mostly single target on-field DPS. She has lots of different teams that she can work well in. Plunge Navia, Bennett Flex is one of my favorites. Bennett Shengling is really good. Bennett Farina is really good. Bennett Yai is pretty good. Bennett Fischl is pretty good. Like, there's lots of different stuff you can do with Navia. You don't have to use Bennett. I used Chiori something a while back. No, not Chiori. Obviously you can use Chiori. I mean, I used Charlotte in like the healer slot with Thrilling Tales or something like that, and it still performed fine. But she definitely usually either wants Bennett or Shen as the healer, either Chiori or Zhongli or Albedo for the Geo. You can't use Ning Wang and Traveler for free. So I do really like Navia. I'm definitely a big fan. She's not the most top meta pull. I would say she's in there with the best DPSs. She's not probably one of them, but she's not that much worse, and considering how easy and satisfying she is to play, you get big nukes, she's very fun to play. She's definitely not someone I would dissuade anyone from getting. It's like, yeah, she's not as good as Linny or Hu Tao and stuff like that, but I think most people will end up with more consistent and potentially more consistently fast clears with Navia than they will with Linny or Hu Tao, because just most people just either don't really want to learn all the best combos, or it's just hard to play that consistently. So generally Navia is a pretty good pull. Nilou, also a very easy character to play, also generally a good pull. Nilou is more of an AoE character. It's not that she's awful in single target. I think she's pretty underrated in single target, but she's definitely no powerhouse. There's certain abysses that are Nilou abysses that are just insanely good for her, and she becomes like the best character in the game under those circumstances. But otherwise, she's just like a pretty solid, I would put her in one of those top DPSs. Aside from Novelette and Arlecchino, Nilou is in with all the other best DPSs. And I know she's not a DPS, but in terms of the way you build around her team, she's kind of like a DPS, because you're going to be building a team specifically to support her. So honestly, if you are, if you're one of these characters speaks to you and you want to get one of these characters, both of them are, totally worth getting. I would honestly say though, if you're not in love with either of these characters, I don't think either of them is a meta pull. Yes, sometimes Nilou is the best, but that doesn't mean that you have to go for it. Like, characters like Novelette and a lot of Kazuha teams and Burgeon also have good AoE. And so you don't need to go for Nilou to get a team that has good AoE, right? There's lots of good AoE teams that are maybe a bit more consistent in other circumstances, especially since Nilou teams are weak to cryo shields and dendro shields, which makes it a little bit tough for her. Until we get a hydro or dendro character that specializes in breaking any shield or something like that, then Nilou will always be kind of an annoying choice for certain abysses. And for that reason, like, my ability to recommend her to like the general player as like a character that you should get goes down, because if your pool of characters is lower, then when the abysses are bad for her, aka a cry or a dendro shield, it can be pretty rough. Farina did help her though, because it gives her a source of hydro damage. So if you just need to deal with dendro enemies, then Farina can often deal with a dendro, a dendro spectre or two. But overall, both characters are great pulls. Neither of them top meta, but both of them decently meta and easy enough to be solid for most players. If you want one of them, definitely go for them. In terms of the weapon banner, this is a pretty good weapon banner, especially for the Navia puller. If you're a Navia puller, getting a copy of Nilou's key is pretty darn useful. Obviously, it's an HP subset sword, so it's good for characters like Kuki or Layla if you're using them on certain teams, but also putting the key on Farina is really, really good, especially if you're doing Farina vape teams of some kind. whether Farina's vaping or someone else is vaping. And obviously the key is insane on Nilou. It's one of the biggest signature jumps we have in the game. If you're a Nilou enjoyer, Navia's weapon as a stat stick is like solid, but not insane. But Nilou's weapon is so good that if you do want to vertically invest in Nilou, it's either going to be her signature or Nahida. I would personally lean towards her her signature is cheaper, but it's also more scuffed, and Nahida is more universal. So depending on how much you like Nilou will inform whether you want to vertically invest first in Nahida C2 or in Nilou's weapon. Either one is really a good choice. For the second half, this is where things get extra spicy because first of all, we have Emily, who's looking like a burning character. I'll have a full pre-release for Emily coming out tomorrow. But she's gonna be she does more damage in burning, and she's basically an off-field DPS that finally rivals Xiangling for off-field DPS on like monopyro teams and melt teams and stuff like that. She is more single target locked, but she does more damage, it's looking like. So Emily's looking like a really good pickup, but I don't know that she's like a meta character that everyone should get. I would skip her going into Natlan if you're like on the fence, because if you're like talking about meta, she could be meta, but I don't know that she'll be meta at release. Probably by the time Natlan comes, maybe she'll be better, or maybe other characters will be better. There's so much unknown going into a brand new region. So if you're pulling for meta, it's sort of better to stick with what's proven, because she probably but then again, it could be a long time until she releases. Just wait for my day one guide. I'll be having a day one guide where I'll go through all of Emily's teams and talk about how much of an upgrade she actually feels like. So if you're pulling her at Emily, just wait to make that decision. Until then, we'll do a pre-release guide, but we really can't know for sure until we actually get her reveal. As far as Yelan is definitely a meta pull. I would recommend to Yelan for anyone who has interest in Yelan. I would recommend Yelan. She's kind of the fact that she works so good with Farina, and most people should have Farina, and she just like enhances so many teams, and not just Farina, so many other characters. And especially if you don't have C6 Xingqiu, like she's almost a must pull if you don't have C6 Xingqiu, and even if you do, you can use them on both sides of the abyss. So many characters want Hydro. She buffs the on-field character. She does a ton of off-field damage. She's HP scaling, so she's extremely good with Hydro resonance. She's essentially the main DPS of Farina Yelan teams, even though you can have another main DPS on there, to the point where you can run driver characters on field, like driver healers, just because that's basically because Yelan's damage is so impactful. So she's a character that if you have interest in Yelan, you should get her. It's not that you have to get her. You can definitely skip her, especially if you have Farina and Xingqiu and say Novelet. That definitely puts you in a place that you can more easily skip Yelan, but even then, you can run Novelet Farina on one side and Yelan Xingqiu on the other in a double Hydro team, either double Hydro Hyper Bloom, which is one of my favorite Hyper Blooms, or she can be the single Hydro for Hyper Bloom, or the single Hydro for Vape, or double Hydro Vape. There's just so many things you can do for Yelan. I think that she's the second best character in the game, but again, we are just about to head into Natlan, so it's totally possible that we get other types of broken characters. Spoiler alert, we're getting a Hydro character in Natlan. So it's possible that you should skip Yelan and go for that new Hydro character. We will be putting out a Natlan speculation video later today, so make sure to subscribe for that. So like, as good as Yelan is, if you're feeling like, I really like the look of those Natlan characters, like she will come back. So don't feel like you have to get her. Pulling for meta in a gacha game is just so dangerous because you're very liable to end up with characters that you don't like. Now, Yelan is very hot and she's also so good for exploration. So it's probably unlikely that you'll regret pulling for Yelan. Like, her skill is so good for exploration. I would say that Shen is slightly better for exploration because Shen can more easily go over uneven terrain, and with Yelan it's a bit more tricky, but it's still so good, and having both is just absolutely magnificent. So out of all the pulls, out of all the pulls in Genshin, Yelan is one I would say, yes, you should wish for this character. You can still get away with skipping her, especially if there's other characters that you want more, but I don't think she's likely a character you regret. Now, as far as this weapon banner, the rumor is that Emily's weapon will be very niche, but very good, and what a surprise. That's like every character, especially in Fontaine so far. So this weapon banner will be an incredible banner for Emily wanters. Getting Yelan's weapon on the way to getting Emily's weapon is spectacular, because it is one of the best weapons in the game. I just released a weapon tier list. I think I put Yelan's weapon at the very top. Make sure you go check out that tier list, by the way. I think it's probably the best 5-star weapon in the game, being great for her, of course, but also super universal. It's just almost the best choice for pretty much every single bow character in the game. And if it's not the best, it's super close. Not the best weapon for like Yelan pullers or aqua pullers who don't want Emily, because Emily's weapon will be likely very niche to her. So yeah, that's what I think about the banners. We also got a brand new skin for Nilou in the live stream, and I think it looks amazing. I'm a big fan of it. I think I will use it over the other skin, but I mean, I like her default skin too. And then we're also getting a Kirara skin, and that one looks amazing. That one's going to be free. The Nilou one will be paid, and we're also getting a free Kirara, so keep that in mind as well with all your pulling decisions. We also got a bunch of quality of life stuff. I'll probably make a separate video on that at some point, so subscribe for that, and subscribe for that Emily guide and the Natlan video later today. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Bye for now.